It is 11 o'clock, everyone. Good morning. I believe Wallace dropped in the chat box that we are recording this webinar so that you know. We want to be able to put these out there on, I don't know, Facebook, YouTube. Wallace would know, someplace where people can go back and review them, right? Hopefully you are at Top Tips for Effective IEP Meetings webinar. That's what we're doing today. This training is going to go over some of the best tips for organizing yourself for your child's IEP. We're going to provide pointers for you in 3 stages: the before, the during, and the after stage of the IEP meeting. Implementing our top 5 tips in each of these sections should result in a better IEP meeting. To ensure this training is helpful and means something to you, we're going to be doing a few interactive activities. We're going to ask you to complete an evaluation at the end. That evaluation is important to us because it helps us continuously improve our training. It should take you less than 2 minutes to complete the evaluation. Everyone completing the evaluation is going to get a copy of the PowerPoint, any handouts that I mentioned, and a certificate of attendance if you need one. If at any time you lose audio or video, you can call in using the phone number included in your registration confirmation. Feel free to submit questions in the chat box. I like it when people talk to me. You'll also have time for questions at the end of the presentation. I'm Melinda Elliott from Southwest Louisiana and one of the presenters for this training, Top Tips for IEP Meetings. Wallace Johnson is with me from Families Helping Families as well. My friend, my co-worker, the person that makes all of this seem to go smoothly. Our center is one of 10 nonprofit family resource centers in the Families Helping Families network of centers. We're here to provide support to parents of children and youth with disabilities or special health care needs. We do this through individual assistance, information sharing, outreach, and trainings like this one. We provide over 100 webinars and in-person trainings a year on special education and disability-related topics. You can check out our events on our website and on our Facebook page regularly and register for any upcoming training that might be of interest to you. We also will take requests for specific training that's not being offered. If you're interested in a topic, someone else is too. And I'm not just talking about education issues, though you're certainly welcome to submit ideas, requests about that, but it could be anything related to the disability field. We have webinars on Social Security. We have webinars on self-determination. We have webinars on individual and family supports, waivers. But if you can think of something that you haven't seen in a while or that you'd like to see, let us know. So our learning goals today is to increase your knowledge in several areas. One of those areas is frequently used acronyms and bulletins related to IEPs and the IEP process. Another one is helping you organize yourself for your next IEP meeting. A different one is important things to do before the IEP meeting. And then there's tips and strategies during the meeting to make it as productive as possible. And the follow-through, that follow-up after the meeting. It's not done with the meeting. And then finally, a list of resources available to support you throughout the process. We want to make sure this training is useful. And one of the ways we do that is through a check-in process. So we're going to ask you a series of 5 questions. It's like a poll. It's not even questions, it's statements. I want you to respond to each one with one of the following things: strongly agree, agree, disagree, strongly disagree, or not applicable. Wallace, can you help me launch the poll?
I'm not able to see the poll for some reason.
All right, let me try. Ooh, I think I can do it, Wallace.
There we go. I see it.
Great. Okay, so here's your statements. The first one: I feel confident in knowing how to prepare for my child's IEP meeting. Number 2, I know how to write a good parental concern statement. Number 3, I understand the order in which the IEP should be completed. Number 4, I understand that I have the right to reconvene the IEP meeting if my child isn't making adequate progress. And then number 5, I feel confident in my ability to be assertive in the IEP meeting if necessary. So I'm going to give you a few more minutes to, not minutes, probably a few more seconds to answer these. Let's see. So it says that only 40% of the people that are participating have answered. Again, I'll give you a few more seconds if you're in the middle. Okay, if you need more time, say something in the chat box now, because I'm ending the poll. Let's see. Are people talking to me in the chat? Nope. People just saying hi and good morning. Good, a great job. I like to see people networking in the chat. So I don't know who answered what to the check-in questions, and I won't know who answered what to the checkout questions, just in case you were curious and I forgot to tell you. Throughout this presentation, I'm going to be using acronyms. I try to give the meaning of the acronym when I use it so that you can get used to hearing it and, hearing jargon. But I kind of forget sometimes. So let me give these to you up front before we get started. IDEA, IDEA, is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It's a federal special education law. LRE means least restrictive environment. That's the place your child should receive their education. FAPE, free appropriate, FAPE, free appropriate public education, is the cornerstone of IDEA. IEP, individualized education plan, the document that directs all special education and related services for your child. ODR, the officially designated representative. That's the school's person who's authorized to sign off and commit school district resources Using SMART goals is how each IEP goal should be written. They need to be SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, results-oriented, and timely. LDOE or LDE is the Louisiana Department of Education. They have 3 bulletins to guide school districts in ensuring IEPs are developed as intended by IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Those 3 are Bulletin 1508, the Pupil Appraisal Handbook, Bulletin 1530, the IEP Handbook for Students with Exceptionalities, and Bulletin 1706, the Regulations for Implementation of the Children with Disabilities Act. Before we start with our tips, I first want to mention the importance of good documentation. This can be key to an effective IEP meeting. So, when you're in an IEP meeting, nobody wants to hear somebody was going to do this or somebody was going to do that, but you can't remember, or nobody else can remember, but somebody sent you something and you lost the paper. So if you have a way to be organized and to organize all those documents in a way that makes sense to you, we have one if you need a way to do it. We recommend a basic IEP binder system. A 3-inch 3-ring binder is usually the perfect size to keep a school year's worth of documents. It also allows you to put all of your paperwork in one place and easy to find information throughout the year, not just during the IEP meeting. Don't worry about this list I'm going to give you down, writing it down, because you're going to get the list later. But the sections that Families Helping Families recommends having in your binder include reminder for an upcoming IEP meeting. That's a section to jot down your thoughts, your notes, info you don't want to forget for future IEP meetings. Included in there should be a priority list for the meeting, student information. Then a school contact list should be another section. That's the names and contact information of members of your IEP team, as well as service providers. Another section might be verbal communication log. I don't know about you, but sometimes I talk to 2 or 3 school system people, and/or I had 2 children in special education, so I might be talking to one person about one child and 2 or 3 or more other people about another child. Anyway, it got confusing. So a verbal communication log was very important to me. Every time you speak to someone, even from the date to the time, to who it was, to what was said, so you can have it, look at it, remember, were you supposed to do something? Were they supposed to do something? There should be a section for written communication. I'd put printout of emails in there too, because that's considered written communication. Then a section for school evaluations. You want to keep a copy of your consent to evaluate and the most recent evaluation. Then private evaluations, if you have any of those. So, having a separate section to be able to find those and be able to talk about them and how they're important to the IEP. I would keep a copy of the parents' rights in there and a copy of the current IEP. Then if there were any IEP meeting notes, I'd keep that. Prior written notices, I'd keep those. And then, you get those results from different types of standardized testing they do. I keep those. Report cards, samples of schoolwork. at least something monthly, but sometimes people keep something more often so that they can look back over smaller amounts of time than monthly. But like I said, at least monthly. If your child has a behavior intervention plan, you want it in this binder. Disciplinary notices, whether they're office referrals or actual suspensions or whatever, you need those. Notes from the teacher about academics and or discipline or behavior. And then, a section for other, something that didn't come up anyplace else. So everyone that does the evaluation for this webinar is going to get a printable copy, email copy of our sections listed with additional instructions. All of the IEP tips we'll cover have a place to live in this binder as well. So, getting prepared, the top 5 tips. Now you know how to organize yourself. Let's start with getting prepared for our IEP meetings. These are our top 5 tips of things parents should do before the meeting. Getting prepared, tip number 1, create a priority list. Write out your questions and items you want addressed, then prioritize them in order of importance. You'll also want to focus on problems and solutions, not necessarily the people. So, for example, you're concerned your child's reading level is still significantly below his grade level. Some of the questions you might want to ask is, how will things be different this year to ensure more progress is made? Or tell me about the different program you'll be using and how I can support my child at home. Or how long will you implement this program to determine if it's successful? And then keep in mind, you can say, what's the plan if this program doesn't turn out to be successful? Just because we're doing it, if it's not working, we can change it, right? They're not focusing on the teacher, but they're focusing on the program and the process to help your child's reading ability improve. You might also want to discuss items that aren't academic in nature. For example, if your child's going to be changing campuses at the end of the school year, you might want to include something in the IEP about how the school support him in a smooth transition. If your child's being bullied, you want to know what's being done to eliminate the bullying of your child. If your child doesn't have any friends, you might want to inquire about what the school can do to help support developing peer relationships. You also might want to include relevant information from IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, to support your priority items. Finally, if you use an IEP binder, I'd recommend keeping that priority list as the first page under reminders for upcoming meetings so that you can go back to it and see what's been accomplished. Getting prepared, tip number 2, educate yourself. Familiarize yourself. Remember, these are all things before the IEP meeting. Familiarize yourself with your child's legal rights for special education. That's part of what you're doing today, right? Read the parental safeguards the school usually sends home with your meeting notice. We'll also give you a link to that document on the Louisiana Department of Education website. Parents must receive written notice prior to the IEP meeting, so read it. The notice has to include the purpose, the time, the location, who's going to be there. That's always interesting. If a required team member needs to be excused from the meeting, the parent's right to take other participant, well, it's going to include if the required team member needs to be excused. It's also going to include the parent's right to take other people to the meeting, providers, staff from Families Helping Families, your friend, anybody that's you and your child support. It should include the student's right to participate, the name of a contact person if you have questions prior to the meeting. If that meeting day or time doesn't work for you, notify the school immediately to set up a new day or time. When you contact the school, be prepared to give them a couple of 3 choices for when you're available to meet. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, requires school districts to notify parents of the meeting early enough to ensure they'll have an opportunity to attend and to schedule the meeting at mutually agreed upon time and place. Even though the law does not require parents to notify the school if they are bringing anyone with them, we believe parents should always disclose this in advance. So it helps with a positive relationship between parents and the school system. If you require any special accommodations to participate in the meeting, let the school system, let the contact person know that too. Some parents might need a language interpreter or a language translator. If the school doesn't know in advance that's needed, they probably aren't going to have it available. The child with a disability nor their siblings should ever be expected to fill that role of interpreter or translator, by the way. The school will provide somebody. Reread your child's evaluation. That's my next thing under this tip, my next point under this tip. Parents have reported that it's often very helpful to reread their child's latest evaluation. Lots of times, new things pop out that you might want to address. Parents have reported that every time they reread their child's evaluation, they learn something new. There's so much in there. If you don't understand all the testing lingo, focus on what you do understand in the recommendations, and then come back later after the IEP meeting and talk to somebody about the lingo. So another one of the points under this tip is talking to other parents or calling Families Helping Families. Many parents find it helpful to speak to other parents. I see parents speaking on Facebook all the time. I know parents that have a group of parents that they talk to about IEP meetings. Every parent's going to is going to have a different experience in their meeting, and those experiences might help you have a more productive meeting. That's particularly important if you think the meeting's going to have a negative tone. It would be great to meet with parents that feel their meetings were productive and positive. Keep in mind, if you speak to a parent that has negative experiences in the IEP meeting, that doesn't mean your meeting's going to be negative. Many IEP meetings are held annually without any negativity. Parents are always welcome to call the Families Helping Families Center to talk about IEP meetings for assistance in preparing for the IEP meetings. Create a research list. That's a list of things you might want to look at that come into mind as you reread the evaluation or when you're talking to other parents. For example, if your child isn't making progress on a specific goal, you might want to do research to determine why this is a problem and offer some possible solutions. So, getting prepared, tip number 3. It's to communicate with your child. So, I can't emphasize the importance of talking to your child before the meeting, and preferably not just the night before. Hopefully, you're already having ongoing conversations with your child about school. This is an experience your child is living through every day, well, 5 days a week. Some parents have found it useful to use something similar to a day planner to jot down some daily notes in the event that they need to reflect back on something or start seeing a trend. If your child is verbal, you can often have great conversations with them. Although kids are pretty smart and often like to shrug their shoulders or give yes or no answers. Therefore, you want to ask questions in a way that'll give you information that you need or could use. So I like giving examples. Instead of asking your child if they have any friends, ask them to tell you the names of their friends. Or if you know your child's supposed to have extra time to complete an assignment, don't ask them if they were given extra time. Ask more general questions that kind of require an explanation. Now, if your child isn't able to communicate with you, you can use your daily planner to jot things down like Alex came home happy, Alex seemed to be irritable. Start watching for patterns of irritability, because that can give you something you can inquire about. For example, you can say, I noticed Alex seems to be irritable every Wednesday. What's happening on Wednesdays? You might find out that Alex is getting adaptive PE on Wednesday afternoons and he doesn't like going outside. You can also ask to speak to others in the school or the class for information. If your child attended previous IEP meetings, ask them what they thought about the process. Ask them if they want to be more involved or if they have anything that they want to add. If your child hasn't attended previous IEP meetings, ask them if they want to. If they don't want to attend the entire meeting, you could recommend they come for 5 minutes for introductions. Sometimes they're really surprised, kids are really surprised to see the number of adults that have come together for their benefit. Getting prepared tip number 4. This one is to request any documentation you need. If your child's been newly evaluated, you should receive a copy of the evaluation in advance. That's usually provided before your first IEP meeting, but sometimes lots of times, schools schedule the IEP meeting immediately following that determination meeting to stay in compliance with their timeline. If it doesn't give you enough time to think about the evaluation results and prepare for the IEP meeting, ask for the date to be separated and propose an alternative date. Some parents want to see a copy of goals and objectives the schools will be proposing. Parents can certainly ask for it. It's a good idea, but it's not a requirement of IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, to get this in advance. But like I said, it's a good idea. Schools will often give it to you in advance. If your child has a health plan, do you need updated information from the physician or service provider? Just a thought. If your child has a behavior intervention plan, request a copy of any proposed changes they want to make to the plan. That's going to give you time to think about those changes and determine if they will work for your child or not. If your child sees a therapist outside of school, find out if they want to submit anything to the IEP team for consideration. So are there any questions? Nope, nothing going on in the chat. Okay, so we're at our last getting prepared tip number 5, draft your concerns. The entire IEP is developed by a team, but parental concern sections provide a space for parents to provide a statement about their concerns. The parental concern section of the IEP allows parents to share their most pressing concerns with the IEP team. It's a great way to document the child's strengths and struggles at school and at home. It's also a great chance to tell the team who your child is beyond the test scores and beyond their performance in school. And then think about all concerns. Is your child working on grade level? Are they making good grades? Are they working on the same things that other students in their age are working on? Can they do the same things other kids can do? In addition to academics, I want you to think about self-help skills and other skills that's going to make your student independent. You're not limited to that tiny space. You can type as much as you need. One of the resources we're going to send you today is what you want to include in the parental concerns part of the IEP. Some parents send the information to the teacher beforehand, asking for it to be cut and pasted in the IEP document. Regardless of how you do it, there's a few things to keep in mind. There's not a maximum length, but you do want to keep it relevant and as short as possible. Keep your language polite and professional. Try to avoid emotionally charged statements by talking about facts. Discuss what is and what isn't working. Clearly state your concerns and provide any recommendations or solutions that you might have to address the concern. So, participant sharing time. We've shared our pre-IEP tips. You can use your chat box to let me know if you have any other great suggestions, because all of these suggestions are suggestions that we got from parents. So I am curious to see if y'all have any more suggestions that we may or may not need to add, or if y'all just have questions or something you want to say. And this screen that I am has no time whatsoever. So Wallace, you might have to tell me when I'm getting too close to the end of time. Let's go on. During the IEP, so the top 5 tips while we're in the IEP meeting. We did the 5 before the IEP meeting. These are during the IEP meeting. Tip number 1. This is my favorite tip. Stay calm and carry on. Don't forget to ask questions. You, the parent, are an important member of the IEP team. You know your child better than anybody else does. And you know things about your child that nobody else does. Not valuing yourself as an important and equal member of the team is a huge mistake that's made by some parents. Other team members might have PhDs and they might have a shirt and tie and fancy titles. That doesn't mean their opinions have more value or that they necessarily have more knowledge of your child's needs and the best strategies to meet those needs. The purpose of the IEP meeting is to work as a team to come up with the best plan for your child. If parents weren't valued members, IDEA would have never put as much emphasis on parental participation as a requirement. So there's no need to feel intimidated. Attending an IEP meeting can be emotional for some people. Try to stay calm if you disagree with anything being said. If you feel like you're unable to stay calm or find yourself getting too emotional, ask for a break. Tell the team you need, or, tell them you need to reconvene at another time. Even if the meeting's being held on the expiration date of your child's current IEP, they can still reconvene the meeting without any interruption in services. Then don't feel like you can't ask questions. There'll be a lot of special education and curriculum jargon going on. The professionals on the team might use acronyms and forget parents don't always know what it means. So anytime you don't understand something, ask a question. If you ask a question and don't understand the answer or it doesn't make sense, keep asking, keep probing until you do understand. Then if you don't agree, even if you don't agree, you want to understand what's going on. Some parents find it very difficult to stay focused and not get too emotional. We like to tell parents to think about it like a business meeting. You're going to meet with a group of individuals to discuss important things about your child. Some parents report that if they dress more professionally, they get more respect. So, if you don't show up in your yoga pants, if you don't believe that will get you respect. Remember that our entire team is all humans as much as we don't always want to admit it. And we can judge people incorrectly. I have. Do what you need to do to put yourself in the best position to mentally accomplish the goal. All right, let's see. IEP tip number 2, don't forget to bring your documentation. Hopefully you've created a binder or some kind of organizational system for all of your paperwork. That alone is going to give you confidence. When you enter the room, you know that you already have documentation you need, along with your list of priorities, and you're ready to be an equal team member. Bring extra note paper to take notes. One of the sections in your binder is for IEP notes. Take as many notes as you like. Some parents like to go home and type them up and put them in the binders, and others just leave them as they wrote them. Bring a copy of your parental concern statement, even if you already sent it to the IEP team. Make sure that what you sent is what has been entered into the document. Use our SMART goal template when the team is talking about goals. Every IEP goal should be specific, measurable, attainable, results-oriented, and timely. I'm checking the chat. Review current IEP and current evaluation. No, not at this time. Okay, cool. Often things may pop into your head, but it might not be the appropriate time to bring them up during the IEP meeting. We call those parking lot items. We park them until it's time to bring them up. You can create a parking lot for things that pop up along the way too. At the meeting, anything that's left in your parking lot that wasn't addressed, you bring it up then. The idea is to get the answers. IEP tip number 3, the IEP team members. Before the meeting starts, make sure the required team members are present. If there are people you don't know, ask for introductions. IDEA states the following are team members: the parents of a child with a disability, not less than one general education teacher if the student is or could be participating in the general education environment, not less than one special education teacher, or where appropriate, less than one special education provider, a representative of the school district who's qualified to provide or supervise the supervision of specially designated instruction to meet the unique needs of a child with disabilities, someone who's knowledgeable about the general education curriculum, someone who's knowledgeable about the availability of school resources, of resources in the school district, someone who can interpret instructional implications of evaluation results. And that person could be somebody that was a member of the evaluation team. Then other individuals have knowledge or expertise regarding the child, like related service personnel, personnel that you access outside of the school system, and whenever appropriate, the student should attend. So during the IEP meeting, tip number 4, Tip 4 involves the order of the IEP meeting. Boy, we could spend a lot of time on this one. But keep in mind that there are other webinars that go into more detail about the order of the meeting. For the purpose of this training, I'm going to mention these briefly. Those other webinars are called Navigating the IEP. But anyway, so the IEP is designed to flow a certain way, and things need to be done in proper order to ensure placement decisions are correct. If the student is turning 16 this year, or if the student's already 16, then the transition page should be completed first. Otherwise, the IEP team will start with the general student information. Next, there's the educational needs areas. And then once the team has determined the educational needs area, the present level of performance is written based on the student's evaluation and other reports. Then the team could develop annual goals for special education need area. Once all of that's done, accommodations are going to be discussed, and programs and services to support the student reaching their annual goals are going to be decided. If the student's not participating in general education classes or extracurricular activities with non-disabled peers, there has to be justification as to why. Once that's done, service and placement is decided. Finally, the consent is given by the parent and the officially designated representative when both sign off on the IEP. So, during the IEP, tip number 5, have no regrets. So, there's nothing worse than going to an IEP meeting and saying to yourself, why did I sign that? Or why didn't I mention? When you leave the IEP meeting, you want to have no regrets about any action you've taken or not taken. So, there's like some common regrets parents have reported to us. One of them was, I knew I should have made them write that in the IEP. You probably have heard that saying that if it isn't written down, it never happened. Well, that can't be any truer than with an IEP, an individualized education plan. Make sure everything is written on the IEP. If it doesn't make it to that IEP, chances are it won't happen. Regardless of how minor it seems to be, if you expect it to happen, it must be on the IEP. If you and the team are unsure where to put something, let them put it under your parental concern. I had it put in my child's IEP. He was allowed to wear pull-up pants without a belt and didn't have to tuck in his shirt. He was more independent with toileting that way, and it didn't want any backlash about him being out of uniform, you know? Okay, another one of those regrets. Why did I sign the IEP when I didn't agree with everything? If you have any doubts at all, don't sign it. Call it a mother's intuition or just a gut feeling. But if your gut's telling you something isn't right, then it usually isn't. Don't feel rushed to sign the IEP document. Ask for a completed copy to take home. Read it again and share it with a spouse, a friend, or a trusted support person. Don't ever feel pressured to sign. Another regret. Why am I not more assertive? Everyone wants to be nice and polite, but sometimes you have to be assertive. Assertive doesn't have to be mean or nasty or aggressive. How can I get the resources necessary to ensure my child receives a free, appropriate public education? Every school's campus has the person called the ODR, the officially designated representative of the school district. That person's allowed to sign off on the IEP and commit the school system's resources to the student. If parents are asking for something above and beyond that might be more costly than normal, the officially designated representative, the ODR, must be truly able to make that type of a decision. If she can't, then the parent should insist on a representative from the school district level to attend the meeting. You don't want your issue delay relayed to someone secondhand. You want to be able to sell your child's needs firsthand to the person that's going to ultimately make the decision. All right, we are at participant sharing time again. We're finished with our IEP tips for during the meeting, before the meeting, and during the meeting. So chat me up, talk about tips that you might know that weren't mentioned or things you have questions about. The next training about Social Security benefits. Wallace, are you on the webinar? Can you drop the information about the Social Security? Is that ready yet? About the Social Security benefits into the chat box? We have one. We're working on it. I saw a flyer. I'm not sure if the flyer's been approved. You know, there's a process, but
I'll send it out to everybody at the end of the webinar. I have it. It's in the stuff to send out afterwards.
Hot dog. Thank you so much, Wallace. Let's see, what else is there in here? And the other things were from the participant sharing time before. All right. And like you're probably tired of hearing me say, anytime you got something, drop it in the chat. Let's get it, talk about it before you and I forget. Let's see.
And it's about 10 minutes till, so we're running low on time.
I guess I need to hurry. I'm sorry. After meeting, 5 tips. You've heard the 5 tips before, 5 tips during, the 5 tips after. Let's talk about 5 tips before, during. Now let's talk about the 5 tips afterwards. Brain dump. This is another one I like. Within 48 hours of the meeting, I can't tell you how important it is to dump all of that fresh information onto a paper or onto a little electronic format. If you wait longer, you're going to start forgetting things. You want to make really good notes from the meeting and send follow-up correspondence if you need to school personnel. So like follow-up correspondence might be something like, "Dear Miss Smith, thanks so much for giving me the time to express my concerns about my son. We discussed so many things, but I wanted to make sure this doesn't get lost on your radar. 1, you agreed to 1, help determine if a para would be beneficial in math. 2, speak to the occupational therapist about communicating regularly with my son's teachers and myself. 3, complete the necessary paperwork to get my child tested for assistive technology. I look forward to hearing from you in the next 2 weeks, or you might give a date, 2 to 3 weeks away, and then you follow up again if you didn't hear back from them. So I even put that I'm supposed to have gotten the information into my calendar so I can remember to follow up. That's how bad my memory is. Anyway, let's see. After the IEP, tip number 2. So now that you've done a brain dump, did you sign the IEP? If not, you're going to have to do something. If you left the meeting with a copy of the IEP unsigned, you need to review the IEP again and make some decisions. Number 1, are you going to sign it as is? If not, why? And what's the plan? You need a plan. 2, will you ask more clarifying questions before you decide? If you plan on asking more questions, start that list of questions right away and email them to the team and request they email you the answers back. If information needs to be added to the IEP, then reconvene the meeting to have the information added. Don't just take their word if it's not in writing. It's not about a lack of trust. It's about making sure it's documented so nobody forgets it was discussed and agreed upon. Should staffing changes take place during the next year, the document is the instruction manual for new teachers or therapists. Everything needs to be in writing. Will you ask for a reconvene of the IEP team? This is like the third thing that you could do. Ask for a reconvene of the IEP team. If you're reconvening, make sure you put in writing what you want to do or talk about when you reconvene, and offer them different times and dates. Just because the IEP meeting is over doesn't mean everything stops. Even if you signed it, this is where the real work begins for you and your child. So after the IEP, tip number 3, the follow-up. If you committed to doing something at the IEP meeting, don't forget. You don't want to lose credibility with your team by promising to do something and then not doing it. Like we talked about before, we always recommend that you put that type of communication in writing. Make sure you notify the IEP team of your follow-up efforts. So if you were supposed to contact the doctor and you notice it's been a week and a half, you want to let them know that you contacted the doctor and you're still waiting for an answer. And if you don't get an answer, you'll contact him again shortly or something. Let them know that you're working on it. After the IEP, tip number 4 is to monitor your child's progress. How are you going to know if your child is making progress on her IEP goals? You might need to do what we call progress monitoring. If your child's not making adequate progress, you need to reconvene the IEP meeting and discuss other options. Keep in mind that doesn't mean the child immediately needs to go to a self-contained class. Maybe he needs more supplemental aids and supports. Moving a child to a more restrictive environment should never be the first answer to lack of progress. In addition, if moving a child to a more restrictive environment changes that child's placement, that can't happen without another reevaluation. We've previously discussed SMART goals. Follow those guidelines to determine if progress is being made. After the IEP, tip number 5 is to communicate. Just because the meeting's over and you have another year before your next meeting doesn't mean you can't stop communicating. You need to continue to communicate with your child's teachers, and your child. Communicate with your child's teachers at least once a month to make sure things are going okay. And if you're having a rocky year, you definitely want to communicate more often than that. Or if your child's a non-speaker, you definitely want to communicate more often than once a month. Communicate with your child daily if possible to make sure they're working on the IEP goals and they're receiving accommodations and modifications on their IEP. If your child has more significant disability or has trouble communicating their needs, watch them for changed behaviors that might be a red flag that isn't right. Being the parent of a child with an IEP requires you to be more involved than a child without an IEP. That's the only way you can exercise your right to your child's free, appropriate public education. Uninvolved parents that just show up at an IEP meeting and otherwise don't ever check in aren't going to ever truly know if FAPE, free, appropriate public education, is being provided. Remember, if your goal is for your child to grow up into the most independent adult possible, you must be involved. So, can y'all think of any other tips after the IEP meeting? We're like so close to the end, but I also Wallace has already dropped the link to the evaluation in the chat box. But I want to make sure that if you have something to say, if you have questions, if you have something in particular you need to know, you let us know. Okay, let's move on. The IEP process can only be successful if everyone in their room shows up ready to listen, understand, communicate with respect. At the end of the day, everyone should be there for the same reason, to help the student achieve their greatest potential. Contrary to what you might hear from others, IEP meetings are not about winning or losing, and definitely don't have to be combative. While both parents and teachers can be critical of one another, they need to be quick to acknowledge things that are going well and build on those things. So if you got a question, ask me now. We're going to do the recheck. Follow up. Yep, I agree. Follow up is important. And that's the one thing people forget. Okay, so check-in statements, and I am in charge of the poll. So let me see if I can.
Does everybody see it? Because I think I launched it.
Ooh,
Is it there?
I see it, but sometimes that doesn't mean anything. Okay, so tell me if you see it in the chat box. Oh, great. Thank you, Miss Leanne. You did, but it went away. Let me see. Can you see it now? Do you see it, Wallace?
Okay, I relaunched it, so hopefully y'all can see it.
One more time. So the answers are strongly agree, agree, disagree, strongly disagree, are not applicable. The questions, the statements, I keep wanting to say questions. The statements are, number one, I feel confident in knowing how to prepare for my child's IEP. Number two, I know how to write a good parental concern statement. Number three, I understand the order in which the IEP should be completed. Number four, I understand I have the right to reconvene the IEP meeting if my child isn't making adequate progress. 5, I feel confident in my ability to be assertive in the IEP meeting if necessary. Even if you weren't here for the check-in, you can do this recheck process because we get really good information either way. So don't feel like you shouldn't answer the questions. We'd appreciate it if you would. And I want to wait about 10 more seconds and then I'll end this poll. All right. So here's a list of those resources. that we talked about earlier. When you get this PowerPoint, you'll get it virtually. It'll be emailed to you, and these will be hot links that you can go to be able to see the things that we're talking about. Let's see. Then there are the handouts that we talked about. This is a list of those handouts. You're going to get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. Make sure you complete that evaluation so you can get a copy of these documents. The IEP binder is really wonderful, and SMART goals aren't half bad either. Let's see. Oh, please complete your evaluation. Wait. Let me check the chat box. Wallace put you a link to the evaluation again. He's telling you that at the close of the webinar, he's going to send you the stuff, but please don't forget to do our evaluation. You're going to, it helps us provide free training for, on a variety of other topics. Our funders look for these and look at these. We look at these. This is the place to write in. If you've got an idea for a webinar that we haven't considered, write it in. Because we really would appreciate it. Here's my information. We covered a bunch of information, and Wallace didn't put his name up here, but in all honesty, Wallace can answer questions about before, during, and after the IEP meeting just the same as I can. But you're welcome to call and talk to either one of us. I hope you've learned something new. That's always my litmus test of these, is did I learn something new? But if you have a question and you were shy and you didn't want to ask it today, or you think of it later, call us, email us. We answer any way that you let us know what you need. And I sure appreciate y'all attending. I'm going to hang out for just about another minute and see if anybody has something to say, and please do my evaluation. Thank you.